Sorry, this seat isn't meant for someone like you." The voice rang out, bitter, sharp, so clear that the entire first-class cabin of Astraeus Airlines fell into silence. The man blocking the aisle was Martin Doyle, a senior flight supervisor. In his hand was a printed passenger manifest marked with bold red ink. Standing before him was a young girl, brown-skinned, wearing a black hoodie, carrying an old backpack. She had just placed her carry-on into the overhead bin. A nervous smile had barely started to form before it was crushed by Doyle's condescending smirk. "This section is reserved for guests with profiles appropriate for our premium cabin, and you clearly aren't that kind of person." No one laughed, no one stepped in. Some passengers turned their heads away, others stole glances. A silver-haired man, Thomas Langford, took a sip of champagne, eyeing the girl as if she were a knockoff handbag that had wandered into a Louis Vuitton showroom. The girl stood still. No outburst, no protest. She simply pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling. She tapped the first name in her contacts. "Dad." Her voice barely above a whisper. "They're kicking me out of a seat I paid for." On the other end, footsteps halted. "I'm on flight AA402, first class." A pause, then a voice, deep, sharp as ice. Not loud, but with a tone that froze everything it touched. "Who just spoke to my daughter?" If you've ever witnessed injustice in public and felt powerless to stop it, this story is for you. We tell what others stay silent about. And if you believe justice doesn't require power to exist, follow our channel, because there are still truths no one has told. 2 hours earlier, Layla Monroe, 17 years old, arrived at the check-in counter at Miami International Airport. In her hand was a first-class ticket to New York, a gift from her father, Darius Monroe, celebrating her acceptance into Hamilton Academy of Law. But instead of a congratulatory smile, she was met with an icy stare from the check-in agent, Lindsay Ashford. "First class. Are you sure this name is correct?" Layla nodded, handing over her documents. Lindsay typed the name into the system. Her eye twitched slightly when she saw Darius Monroe, the name listed as the ticket's payer. No one had to say it aloud. The entire check-in team around her instantly understood what that name meant. Director of the FBI, the man who could launch an investigation into anyone, including the airline itself. Lindsay hesitated for a split second, then continued, her voice flat and chilled. "Everything checks out. You'll go to gate 22. Boarding at 2:10 p.m. No apology for the suspicion. No have a pleasant flight. Just a reluctant acknowledgement." As if Layla was only allowed through because someone powerful was behind her. As Layla walked away, Lindsay leaned toward a co-worker and whispered, "Monroe. Seriously?" "Yeah, his daughter. But just look at her. Classic case of black privilege trying to sneak into high society." A quiet chuckle, a snap of fingers, a condescending glance at Layla's sneakers. As Layla passed through security, Lindsay Ashford leaned slightly toward the colleague at the next counter. "Whitney Langford, the morning's check-in supervisor." "Name's Monroe," Lindsay whispered. "The girl says she's going to law school, Hamilton something." Whitney looked up from her laptop, frowning. "Monroe? As in Darius Monroe?" Lindsay nodded, lowering her voice further. "Tickets booked under his name. But with how she's dressed, I thought it was fake." Whitney narrowed her eyes, glancing in the direction where Layla had just disappeared. "Could be real, but I heard Darius has an illegitimate daughter. From his first wife, I think." "Right, and now his little princess thinks she's got what it takes to squeeze into first class," Lindsay scoffed. Both chuckled quietly. The clicking of keyboards resumed, along with bitter, unnoticed stares. Layla knew nothing of that conversation, but she felt it. That familiar shift in tone, a kind of hollow politeness, a temporary tolerance. Granted only because she carried the name of a powerful man. But their eyes still said clearly, "You don't belong here." She proceeded to the first-class waiting area. Though her boarding pass had already been scanned, she was asked to show ID again. "New policy," Whitney explained. But her eyes said otherwise. It wasn't procedure, it was suspicion. Layla sat down on a leather chair and pulled out her law textbook. She tried to keep calm, not letting anyone see the sting beneath her composure. Because in this world, bearing a powerful name doesn't always earn you respect. Sometimes, it just makes people hate you more quietly. Layla Monroe stepped into the first-class cabin, her valid ticket in hand. She walked past rows of Italian leather seats, soft aquamarine carpets, and the indifferent stares of the passengers around her. No smiles, no nods. She was the youngest person in the cabin, the only person of color, the only one not wearing a luxury watch or carrying a designer bag. She found her seat, 2A by the window, sat down, placed her backpack at her feet, fastened her seatbelt. She waited for a greeting, waited for a welcome drink, waited for what every first-class passenger receives once seated. But nothing came. Across the aisle, a flight attendant, Chloe Barnes, was pouring champagne for a well-dressed, middle-aged couple. She walked past Layla, twice, no eye contact, no questions. Layla pressed the call button. The light blinked. No one came. She glanced around, hesitantly raised her hand. Chloe saw her, clearly, then turned away, as if something more important demanded her attention. Moments later, the man in seat 2C, Thomas Langford, turned and looked at her, a sharp gaze as if silently asking, where did this girl wander in from? He adjusted his silk shirt cuff and muttered, just loud enough for her to hear, they really do hand out first-class tickets too easily these days. Layla turned away. Her chest tightened. But she held her composure. She pulled out a book on the U.S. Constitution, the section introducing equal rights, and opened it. But the words blurred. Her eyes couldn't focus. Only one sentence echoed in her mind. I may be sitting in the seat, but in their eyes, I don't exist. The plane hadn't taken off yet. Layla looked out the window. The skies over Miami were clear, as if nothing wrong was happening. Suddenly, excuse me, Miss Monroe. A man's voice. Layla turned. It was Martin Doyle, the lead flight attendant. His expression was anything but friendly. In his hands was a clipboard, something that looked like an official directive. We've just discovered a system error during the seat assignment process, he announced. Unfortunately, you'll need to move to the economy cabin. Layla blinked. 1 second, then 2, then 3. I'm sorry, I have a first-class ticket, seat 2A. Martin nodded but didn't retract his words. Yes, but we now have a priority passenger who needs this seat. We'll arrange the best available seat for you in economy. Layla clenched her hands. I paid for this ticket. I have a confirmation code, a boarding pass. I haven't done anything wrong. Martin glanced quickly at Chloe Barnes, then back at Layla. His gaze now sharper. If you don't comply, we reserve the right to remove you from this flight. A soft chuckle came from across the aisle. Thomas Langford didn't look at her. He simply took a sip of his champagne and murmured, order will be restored. Layla inhaled deeply. She was shaking, not from fear, but from humiliation. She pulled out her phone, turned on speaker, and tapped the only number that made sense in that moment. The only name she could think of now. Dad. The aircraft doors hadn't closed yet. Everyone in the first-class cabin was now staring at Layla. Not out of sympathy, but with a mix of curiosity and quiet contempt. A young black passenger, daring to argue with the lead flight attendant. The unspoken order of silence had been disrupted. Layla pressed the call button. Dad, they're forcing me out of my seat. They say it's a system error, but no one else is being moved. They're recording me. I don't know what's happening. A deep, firm voice came through the phone. Hand the phone to them. Put me on speaker. Layla turned to Martin Doyle. Her hand didn't tremble. Her gaze didn't lower. Lead Attendant Doyle, someone would like a word with you. She placed the phone on the tray table, pressed speaker. Mr. Doyle, this is Darius Monroe, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Who gave you the authority to remove my daughter from a first-class seat that I purchased, confirmed, and paid for in full? A stunned silence fell across the cabin. Martin froze. Chloe Barnes, further down the aisle, stopped mid-step. Rows 1 through 3 turned around in unison. Whispers began to ripple through the air. Darius Monroe. FBI. That's her father? Layla stayed seated. No shouting, no rage. She simply looked Martin Doyle straight in the eyes. Do you still want me to move to economy? Martin swallowed hard, took a step back. It appears we may have made a mistake. Please remain in your seat, Miss Monroe. Over in seat 2C, Thomas Langford crossed his legs, frowning. Just a name, and everything had shifted. He pulled out his phone, typed a short message to someone. Problem, his daughter, need to revise the plan. Layla was allowed to stay in her first-class seat. Martin Doyle withdrew. No apology, no explanation, no drinks were served, no meals were offered, no one checked in on her, everything became invisible. To the crew, to the cabin. Layla might as well have been an alien who had crash-landed in the luxury section. In seat 2C, Thomas Langford, silver-haired, grey suit, posture dripping with arrogance, crossed his legs in silence. He didn't look at Layla. Instead, he opened his phone and sent a short message. Confirmed, she's Monroe's daughter. Seat can't be reassigned. Initiate scenario B. The message was received by a stranger seated in the business class cabin. On his phone screen flashed a logo, Helix Air Group. Langford closed his eyes, exhaling like a monarch momentarily blocked in a calculated move. One girl, and yet she managed to obstruct an entire campaign. Monroe can't touch this airline if he loses his position. And that girl is just a link we need to break early. Because Thomas Langford wasn't just a passenger, he was the chief strategy officer of Helix Air Group Dash, a corporate giant actively scheming to take over Astraeus Airlines by any means necessary, including sabotage from within. And Layla Monroe, daughter of the one man investigating Helix for financial fraud, had just become the first thorn that needed pulling. The plane still hadn't taken off. Layla sat quietly in seat 2A, saying nothing, drawing no attention. But she could feel it. Something was off. Strange glances, whispers behind her, and phones discreetly aimed in her direction from seemingly harmless angles. At the rear of the first-class cabin, Chloe Barnes, the lead flight attendant, leaned in to whisper to Martin Doyle, "If she lashes out, it's over." Martin nodded. His voice was cold as steel. "Keep recording. Any loss of control, and we'll have proof she's being disruptive. Just a short clip is enough to blow up the internet." In seat 3B, a young woman named Sophia Tran froze. She was a freelance journalist on her way to a human rights conference in New York. She had just heard that exchange. Sophia slowly lowered her glass of water, her eyes scanning the cabin. Recording her, trying to bait a girl who hasn't done anything wrong. This is a national airline, not a theatrical stage. Layla had no idea she was being hunted. Every gesture dash, the way she sat, how her eyes moved, even the sound of her sighs, was being silently documented. One raised eyebrow, one slightly raised voice. And they'd have exactly what they needed. Langford checked his watch. 3 minutes until the cabin doors closed. He turned to Chloe Barnes and whispered, "You know what to do." Chloe nodded. She walked over, wearing a rehearsed, polite smile. "Excuse me, Miss Monroe, would you mind lowering your voice a bit? Some passengers are feeling uncomfortable." Layla frowned. "I haven't said anything." "Just following protocol, ma'am," Chloe replied. She stepped back, folded a corner of her uniform sleeve, adjusted her earpiece, and walked away. The cameras were still rolling. Their goal wasn't to catch Layla doing something wrong, it was to make her look like she was about to. 30 minutes after takeoff, everything seemed calm. Layla sat upright in seat 2A, eyes gazing out the window, but just then, Sophia Tran's phone buzzed. A notification from X, formerly Twitter. Video going viral. Top official's daughter causes scene in first class. 24K views in just 12 minutes. Sophia opened the video, just 18 seconds. But it was enough to break a 17-year-old girl's dignity in half. Video begins. Layla turns to Chloe, the flight attendant, and says, Don't I have the right to ask? I'm a first-class passenger. Cut. Her voice is slightly louder. I'm not being disruptive. I'm just... Cut. Chloe frowns, steps back like she's frightened. A caption appears above the video, entitled "Daughter of Power equals disrespecting flight attendants." Sophia frowned. She understood immediately. This was edited. They cherry-picked the moments to make her look arrogant. Meanwhile, back on the ground, online groups erupted into debate. Another entitled government kid who thinks she's royalty. The flight attendant handled it politely and she still raised her voice. Boycott Astraeus. If this is how passengers are treated, who'd want to fly with them? Some accounts even began digging up old photos of Layla at public events with her father, editing her face next to captions like, "The new privileged elite." And amid the growing storm, Layla had no idea the video even existed. She was still sitting quietly in 2A, doing her best to stay calm, believing the worst had already passed. She didn't know that. Outside the plane, social media had already begun turning its back on her. Sophia Tran sat in a rear row, her eyes still locked on her phone. She was a freelance journalist and a former investigative student from Columbia School of Journalism. Skepticism was her second nature. She reopened the viral clip, slowed it down frame by frame, activated metadata tools, and then one detail made her blood run cold. Video source, internal IP, uplinked via Astraeus Airlines' own satellite network. This wasn't recorded by a random passenger. Someone inside the airline uploaded it. Sophia frowned. She recalled the man in seat 1A, Thomas Langford, that icy demeanor, that face familiar. She quickly opened her laptop. The plane's Wi-Fi was weak, but strong enough to access an offline PDF Annual Corporate Profile, Aviation Sector Report. She scrolled past Helix Air Group, page 4, Thomas Langford, Chief Strategy Officer. Sophia whispered, "Langford isn't a passenger. He's a top executive at Astraeus' biggest rival." Layla Monroe, daughter of Darius Monroe, director of the FBI. A man who had publicly opened investigations into Helix Air Group over suspected stock manipulation. And now, his daughter was being turned into a media weapon, a tool to discredit him in the public eye. Meanwhile, Layla's phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages, notifications, articles. She opened one dash and nearly froze at the sight of her face splashed across a tabloid feed labeled "The Arrogant Princess of First Class." She looked around the cabin. Every gaze now avoided hers. Chloe, Martin, even the once polite crew had now turned their backs. This was no longer about a seat assignment. This was a political takedown, strategized, scripted, and launched through a 17-year-old girl in a hoodie, who happened to sit in seat 2C. The plane had just landed in New York. Layla stepped off the jet bridge, eyes focused straight ahead. But her phone buzzed non-stop. It wasn't just notifications, they were warnings. School alert. Your student file at Hamilton Academy has been updated. Please contact the admissions office within 48 hours. Then a cold email. From Hamilton Admissions. We are temporarily re-evaluating your acceptance in light of viral content potentially affecting the school's reputation. Layla froze. They called that edited clip viral content, not defamation. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., inside the office of Darius Monroe, an emergency meeting was underway. His assistant walked in briskly. "Director Monroe, the Internal Inspector General, has issued a notice. You are to be placed on administrative leave for 10 days pending an independent review." Darius gripped the file, not because he was surprised, but because he knew this wasn't a media blunder. This was a political hit. And then came the unexpected blow. His personal bank account, frozen. Reason, suspicious activity tied to foreign wire transfers. A textbook takedown strategy. Strike the family, cripple the job, soil the name, all at once. On social media, headlines erupted by the minute. FBI director loses control of his daughter. Layla Monroe, the face of a spoiled generation. Astraeus Airlines owes its crew an apology for the abuse they endured. In her small rented apartment near campus, Layla sat frozen in front of her laptop. A still frame from the plane showed her mid-sentence, underlined by the headline, "With that attitude, she wants to study law." And for a moment, she started to believe it, that maybe she was wrong to sit in that seat, wrong to speak up, wrong to think. She could just be a regular girl. But she didn't know yet. In a small apartment across West Brooklyn, someone was watching the clip again. And for the first time in 8 years of silence, she decided to speak. The truth was no longer staying quiet. A small apartment in Brooklyn. A woman in her 30s, curly hair tied back neatly, sat at a worn wooden desk. Her name, Naomi Ellis. Naomi was once a senior training specialist at Australis Airlines, in charge of flight attendant training and passenger service oversight for 7 years. She wasn't fired, she left, by choice, after realizing what she later called a system of discrimination disguised as premium experience. When she saw Layla being publicly humiliated online, Naomi wasn't shocked. She knew it was real because she was once told to teach it. She opened her old laptop, plugged in a USB she had kept as a quiet reminder. On it was the original slide deck from an internal training module titled Standardizing First-Class Service Tiered Behavioral Matrix. She scrolled to slide 4, Target Passenger Profile. White, age 40 plus, traditional attire, low likelihood of spontaneous behavior. Watchlist profile, black or minority teenagers, wearing hoodies, AirPods, showing signs of independence. Naomi frowned. Those weren't just observations. They were instructions, ones she was forced to repeat in dozens of training sessions. She hit record, not a speech, just a quiet, factual testimony. My name is Naomi Ellis. I personally trained over 500 flight attendants at Australis Airlines. And I have documentation proving that the way Layla Monroe was treated wasn't an accident. It was the result of an internal bias policy. And I've been silent for far too long. The video was just 3 minutes. No flashy editing. Just a single caption when she posted it. If my daughter were treated like Layla, I'd hope someone like me would stand up. Within 24 hours, 8 million views. #, Justice for Layla began trending. Hundreds of comments flooded in. Finally, someone from the inside is speaking up. Naomi, you're not alone. Layla received the video from an old friend. She watched it in silence, tears rolling down her cheeks. For the first time since the avalanche of attacks, she no longer felt alone. 3 a.m. Layla sat awake in her cramped apartment, unable to sleep. She scrolled through the comments under Naomi Ellis's video. I was ignored too when I flew business class with my mom. I wore a hoodie and they made me prove I bought my own ticket. Thank you, Naomi. I still have the receipts, the emails too. By noon, more than 11,000 people had shared similar experiences. When someone with inside knowledge speaks up, others begin to remember and find the courage to speak too. A black high school teacher in Texas posted a video. I've been a frequent flyer with Australis, but every time I board, the attendants ask to see my ticket. Again. I used to think they were just being thorough. Now I know it was selective control. A white woman tweeted, I once saw a young black boy forced into economy for no reason. I regret not standing up back then. Inside Naomi Ellis's inbox, an anonymous email from a current flight attendant. Thank you for speaking out. I'm leaving the airline soon, but before I go, here's a recording. From the April staff meeting, the regional director said, we need to manage the first-class image. We don't want it looking like a bus station. Another leaked recording, a voice believed to be Martin Doyle. Don't let those kids film themselves crying, just follow protocol. If there's a lawsuit, the company's lawyers will handle it. Then came the bombshell, a leaked email from Elise Thompson, VP of Strategy and Service. We need to control the Layla Monroe crisis, suspend 2 employees temporarily, then stay silent. Avoid using the term discrimination in any internal documentation. Like a storm, the pieces began falling into place. Journalists picked up the trail. Justice for Layla hit #1 on Twitter across the US. A federal petition demanding a full investigation into Australis Airlines. garnered over 2 million signatures in just 36 hours. Layla sat by her window, watching the crowds below march with signs, "It started with a seat. We all deserve to fly with dignity. We are all Layla." For the first time in her life, Layla no longer felt ashamed of the name Monroe. She felt proud, not because her father was powerful, but because she had stayed quiet when it was wise and spoken up when it mattered most. September, United States District Court, Southern District of New York. A black SUV pulls up to the courthouse steps. Douglas Pierce, CEO of Astraeus Airlines, steps out, suit crisp, face pale. Across the street, a crowd of protesters chants behind bold signs, "You can't fly high with discrimination." Pierce must go. Justice for Layla. At the same hour, Thomas Langford, Chief Strategy Officer of Helix Air Group, arrives under subpoena. Federal investigators allege he orchestrated a smear campaign, manipulated media coverage, and triggered a false crisis to affect airline stock markets. The indictment spans over 140 pages. The charges: abuse of power to lead a systemic discriminatory operation, unlawful interference with civilian rights, obstruction of justice via media manipulation and falsified evidence. A key piece of evidence is played in court. An internal recording provided by whistleblower Naomi Ellis. In the video, Douglas Pierce is heard saying, "Let the kids scream. In a month, no one will remember which girl sat in seat 2C. The courtroom falls dead silent. Layla sits in the front row, eyes fixed forward, unblinking. Her father, Darius Monroe, behind her, says nothing. But his fists are clenched white. The trial lasts 5 days. Verdict: Douglas Pierce is found guilty of federal criminal charges. The Astraeus board votes unanimously to remove him immediately. Langford is placed under extended investigation, tied to 3 media outlets and 1 hedge fund suspected of collusion. The next day, at the Astraeus Airlines headquarters, a press conference is held. Interim CEO Elise Thompson, who had quietly resisted Pierce from within, announces a sweeping reform plan. Path Forward Initiative, a commitment to service transparency, zero tolerance for discrimination, and full retraining of frontline staff. Her first honorary advisor for the initiative, none other than Layla Monroe. National news airs a powerful clip. Layla, in a navy blue suit, stands at the podium. "I didn't need seat 2C to prove my worth. I needed every passenger, no matter who they are, to be seen and respected." Within 48 hours, the speech goes viral. Layla speaks trends #1 nationwide. Multiple airlines release new staff training policies. Just hours after the verdict, a White House statement is released. Director Darius Monroe is hereby reinstated to his full position at the FBI. The president personally calls to thank him for standing firm in principle, even while being publicly vilified, for standing by justice and standing by his daughter. That night, Layla returns home. Her father is at the kitchen table, still in his old suit, reviewing files. Layla says softly, "You're back." He looks up, smiles gently. "We both are, sweetheart. But not as we were. We're back, stronger." 1 year later, JFK International Airport. The departure board flashes. Flight AA402, Astra US Airlines, Paris, France. Layla Monroe walks through the priority boarding gate. A soft beige suit, steady eyes. She hands over her boarding pass, still seat 2C. The attendant bows slightly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Monroe. Have a wonderful flight." No second glances, no suspicion, no contempt dressed up as procedure. She steps onto the plane, past economy, past business. Polished leather seats, wine already poured. She slides into 2C, places a small suitcase beside her and opens her laptop. A flight attendant approaches, young, respectful, genuine. "Ms. Monroe, it's truly an honor to have you with us today. If you need anything at all, just press the call button. And thank you, from many of us." Layla smiles gently. "I didn't do anything grand. I just didn't get out of my seat." On the tray table before her lies a small folded card embossed with the new Astraeus Airlines logo. Beneath it, a single line reads, We don't judge passengers by the seat they choose, but by how we choose to treat them. She turns to the window. The plane begins to taxi down the runway. No one turns their back on her. No one asks her to stand. And for the first time in a long time, she feels the sky is truly hers to reach. Some seats aren't just for sitting. They exist to test our patience, to measure how far the world has come in simply seeing someone as human. Layla Monroe didn't ask for privilege. She didn't beg for sympathy. She held onto the seat she paid for and defended it with silence sharper than any outburst. Because sometimes we don't need to shout to make change. We just need to stay, even when the whole room wants us gone. If you've ever been judged by your skin, your clothes, or just for being yourself, remember this story, not to hold resentment, but to remind yourself silence held at the right moment can be its own kind of protest. Seat 2C was once a symbol of shame. Today, it's the spark that ignited a reckoning. And what about you? Have you ever held your seat for something that mattered? Drop your story in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, your voice today could light the way for someone tomorrow. Hit like if you believe everyone deserves respect. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories, real emotions, and hard-earned justice.